Hey there, welcome to Supercharged Fridays. We are now sitting at 89 weeks. 89 weeks of going live here with wonderful people, wonderful conversations. I hope you guys are well. And come in and say hello in the comments so I know you are there and we are not alone. We have a fantastic topic today, which is all about this dastardly imposter syndrome. Like, what is it? Where does it come from? What can you do about it? With a fabulous person who studied it as well and teaches this to, works on it with her clients. So before I bring her on, I just wanted to let you know that I'm running a live masterclass on salary negotiations. It's going to be freaking amazing. Amazing. I mean, everything that I've put on YouTube, etc., is really, really good. But this is like next level. So if you haven't signed up, do that already. I've started seeing enrollments come in, and I'm so excited. It's going to be over a weekend. So and live. It's not a typical course. It's live. So anyway, I wanted to make sure you say you know about it because at the end of the day, we also need to feel like we deserve asking for more money. And what better way to think about than to think about imposter syndrome. So before we go any more, I can't wait to introduce Malaika Simmons, who's joining us all the way from Washington, D.C. Malaika, good morning, and thank you for being with us today.
Good morning. I'm so happy to be here.
I
Yeah.
am so happy you're here. We're going to have a fabulous conversation, Malaika, on all things imposter. You're a fraud. Like when we hear this word, it's so strong. And like, what? You're talking to me? But we have that imposter syndrome. I think all of us have that in our brain. And so before we, get deep into it, tell us a little bit about yourself and your backstory and even like momentology because that's your method, right?
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about that.
Thank you. So I created an intentional framework for living that I call the Momentology Method. And Momentology is the study and practice of operating in the now, succeeding with what you have right now in this moment. So I like to sometimes call it mindfulness for the rest of us, right? Because sometimes mindfulness is somewhat hard to wrap your head around. You're like, am I doing affirmations? Am I meditating? What's going
Yeah.
on? And how is that going to get me my promotion, right? Like we're having a hard time matching the practice with the actual outcomes. And so I believe that my practice helps people to be centered. There are three major parts to it. It's awareness, gratitude, and expectance. And expectance is the one that trips a lot of people up because we have this notion that if I expect things, I'll just be disappointed. And I just have a different take on that. So one of the things that I like to say is that you have to learn how to be yourself in all the places where you are. And that's often difficult because we're oftentimes trying to work our way through and figure out who we need to be.
Yeah.
And so my background actually was from coming up the corporate ladder and showing up as a woman of color in rooms that I was often the only one that looked like me. And I was
Yeah.
trying to figure out how I was going to make it. So I actually didn't create Momentology as a business gimmick or thing. It was like sanity for me. It was a way
Yeah.
for me to
Yeah,
to.
no, that's wonderful. Nothing is better than when things come from our own experience. So
Mhm.
I absolutely love it. We have friends, old friends and new friends joining us. I kid you not, Malaika, from like all parts of the world. So you guys are watching
Awesome.
us. We're so grateful for you. I almost introduced you as because I see a couple of my Indian friends here. I almost introduced you as Malaika Aurora, and I'm like, oops, better be careful
Listen,
because that's
I'll take that though. She's beautiful. I'll
she's
take that.
gorgeous. I don't know if you could call her an actor, a model, influencer, but whatever. She's drop dead gorgeous. So I know what you mean. Like you giving me that, I'll take it.
I'll take it. I'll take it. And I see. Thank you. Is it Katrachita? Thank you. Malaika means
Her
angel.
name is Iris. Her name is Iris, and that's her. I think that's the. There's a story behind that name. Yeah,
Oh,
what were you gonna say about your name?
so it means angel in Swahili. Yeah, and
Yes.
there's also in Arabic. It also means I think it's plural. It's angels
Yes.
in Arabic. So
It's
yeah, thank
interesting
you.
how it's always interesting how language travels. So fantastic. Thank you so much for being here, guys. I really, really appreciate it. And please come in, ask your questions.
I have
And
one. Oh,
yes, Go
I was
ahead.
going to say one quick thing about the name and how it also relates to imposter syndrome, because those of us that have names that are not maybe Western sounding and easy to pronounce, right? So I've taken the saying long ago when I was in meetings, I would say my name and what is it, Michaela, Malika, and there are names Malika. It doesn't happen to be my name, right? And so I say Malaika, and so I say I like a Malaika so people can remember my name, but also it is my way of standing in my power in my name, right? Because the
I'm
imposter
so
syndrome,
happy that you didn't anglicize it.
yes, the imposter syndrome tells you to make it, oh, you can call me M, you can call me, something that's easy for your Mal. No, my name is Malaika. My mother put some love into that, and so I celebrate that. So that,
I love that. We have our friend here who also joined us on Supercharged Fridays a few months ago in New York. And he is originally from, his parents were from Ghana.
mm,
And I think we talked about also, I mean, I know he talks about imposter syndrome and, just being proud of your identity.
yeah.
Nia, to appreciate you being here. So fantastic. So, Malaika, then, I first of all, I highly recommend, if you are not aware or you're not familiar with Malaika's work, definitely check her out on LinkedIn, also her website. I know, Malaika, you also post on Instagram, so you're going to find everything on malaikasimmons.com. So let's get going. Malaika, talk to us about this. Like, there's been so many studies on it, and I want our conversation to be, from a learning and practicality point of view. What is it that we can learn and apply, uh, starting today itself? So how would you define imposter syndrome, and where does it come from?
That's a great question. Imposter syndrome is based in fear. It is fear that we are not who we say we are. It is a fear that people will find us out, right? And so a lot of times we want to be or do something in the world. And then the moment we make that decision, the thing that happens is fear kicks in and tells us that we can't and tells us that we're not, right? So fear will tell us that we're not who we say we are. Our limiting beliefs will tell us that we're not who we say we are. So therefore, how can you, stand up or submit a resume or, go after a particular job? Clear example. There's a job that you read the description. You're like, oh, this is great. I love it. It's like a dream job, or it's perfect for me. But then you start nitpicking and you go, oh, it asked for 8 years and I only have 6. Or, oh, it says that you should have been, in charge of whatever this thing is, and I've never done that. And so you
Yeah.
feel like if you submit your resume, then you will be found out a fraud and people will see that you don't know what you're talking about. And so that's what imposter syndrome is.
And where does that fear that you're gonna, because when I think of fraud, I think of, do you remember that movie Catch Me If You Can?
Yes.
I feel
Yeah.
like that's a fraud. So, and normal people like you and me, why, where, this is I mean, a deeper question, but I don't know if there's an answer to it. Where does that fear come from?
It's rooted partially in a fear of like being accepted. We do a lot of comparison. We compare, keeping up with the Joneses, as they
Yeah.
say here, right? So we're
Yeah.
always comparing ourselves to others. So what we do is it's not necessarily what we don't have, it's what we don't have in comparison to somebody else that we think has more, right? And so from a job standpoint and from a, trying to look for jobs, even if you have a job that you're going for internally, you'll already think in your mind how many other qualified people are there. That's not your job to worry about. This is their job to worry about them getting in the door, right? You, instead of, a lot of us, instead of focusing on what we can do to make sure that we are the chosen candidate or that we are just worthy of that, of being chosen, we start to say, oh, well, so and so has 8 years or they have a PhD. We just start beating ourselves up. And so I think it's just, unfortunately, something that humans do all the time. And we have to create mechanisms for us to combat that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. First of all, I'm having a sip of my tea. I hope you got your coffee because this is very early for her, early for Malaika. So if you guys are watching, give us a little applause if you're on LinkedIn, or a like on YouTube, because yeah, it's so nice that you woke up. I mean, you anyway have to wake up, but got dressed a little bit earlier than normal for us. This is so much learning, and in case anybody's watching us on the replay, put in hashtag replay. I think there's some very interesting comments here that I want to just call out here, and because we may not be familiar with the term, but we're familiar with the sensation of comparisonitis. and I'm not enough in any way. I'm not pretty enough, strong enough, thin enough, smart enough, black enough, white enough, brown enough, urban enough, rural enough. That list goes on. Thomas, this is so interesting. I've never done this before. I can't guarantee it'll be perfect. And could it be that, fear? I mean, that whole perfectionism thing, which a lot of us face.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I was saying that perfectionism, because we like I have to be this perfect. And if I'm not this perfect, then there's something wrong. And if there's something wrong, then they're going to see that in there. And I have to show and be the best all the time. I
All
used
the
to have
time.
this thing about quality, right? Where I say I have to give a quality product. And when I started my first company, it was just like quality, quality, quality. I have to make sure, because I felt like I'm new at this. I need to make sure that I show up correctly, and all my work is done really well. And a cousin of mine who had been in business long before I had said to me one time, "You keep trying to give a Ford, and you keep trying to give a Rolls Royce to people who want a Ford." And I had to think
You
about.
keep trying to give a Rolls Royce to someone who wants like a Honda Civic or a Ford.
They're
Are
asking
you
you
are
for
you
this.
talking about over delivering every
Yes,
time?
over delivering every time. He's like, "You're going above and beyond." And I said, "Well, that's who I am. Like, I want to." And he's just like, "No, what are you being paid for?" And so he said, "You are going to start losing on it will start to show, and you'll start to lose, because if you try to over deliver every single time to a point where it's because it's perfectionism, not because it's quality, because you can do a QA check and make sure it's good, but because it's perfectionism and you're trying to prove something to some, it will start to show." And I had to that was kind of hard for me to take, because I was like,
Yeah.
"What do you mean?
Yeah.
I'm centered on quality." He's like, "No, you're a perfectionist, and you're trying to
Yeah.
get everything right all the time."
Yeah. No, and people who are saying I'm a perfectionist in job interviews, when they say what is your area of development, be very careful. It's an overdone, overplayed trick that doesn't work anymore. It shows that you don't necessarily know yourself really well. Um, And we're going a little off topic here, but Malika, this is very interesting, right? 'Cause there's a very fine line between you just need to do your job versus go the extra mile, and you're someone who gets promoted because you're going above and beyond. How do you balance the two?
I think it's a combination of some level of honesty, first of all, right? What is it that you want, and what is it that you're trying to accomplish? So if you can center on those things, you can use those as guardrails to make you focus on what it is that you need to do, and you won't be tempted to keep adding and all of doing all of the things, right? So think about it like a bouquet. And so you go and you pick some roses and some baby's breath and some hydrangea and things. And at some point, though, you just keep at it's done. At some
Yeah.
point, it's done. The bouquet is
Yeah.
done. And so, if you knew that this is like I'm doing a table setting and it only needs to be a single rose, or I'm doing a flourished, wonderful, big giant dinner, and it needs to be so having the setting the intention of what it is that you want first, and then catering to that time and time again
Yes.
will help you.
Yes. Because one rose is enough.
One
It's a
rose is
question of
sometimes
it's
enough.
enough. It's
Yeah.
enough, and not overdoing it. So that's a really interesting point. Harika, this is exactly what we're talking about. I still feel like I could do better than this, and I can't charge. Well, listen, we get it. Okay, we get it. We're going to talk about it. I have to be careful here, because a lot of people, I don't see your name here, unfortunately. A lot of people think of gender and imposter syndrome. I used to a very large extent, until I read this very interesting article by Cindy Gallop. So if you guys haven't read it, check it out. It's called "Stop Telling Women They Have Imposter Syndrome," and it goes into like a lot of interesting detail. I'm not saying it's one or the other; it's always nuanced. Um, and last thing I want to say, Malika, before we move to the next point, I read somewhere. I don't know if you agree, because now we're getting into psychology and therapy, and I'm not at all equipped. But what I read was a lot of perfectionism comes from people pleasing,
Hmm.
and a lot of people pleasing comes from parent pleasing from
Yeah.
our childhood. Do you
Yeah.
agree?
I do. I think that there is the innate us, the way we are born into the world. There is the cultured us, and I want to say cultured, I mean we've adopted by our surroundings. There's the learned us, and when I say us, these are all versions, right? The version of
Yeah.
you. There's a learned thing by you are taught by other people's reactions to how you show up, how to be. So similarly, when I tell my clients that they need to train people how to treat them, you have already been trained by your environment and your parents. And so sometimes you have to deprogram yourself from
Oh my
things
gosh.
that
I'm going
you
to repeat that. You have to train people how to train you. But first, you got to untrain yourself because you were trained in a certain way which is not serving you.
it's,
Correct?
it's exactly.
Oh my
Um,
gosh. Yeah.
we have to, it's okay to be selfish, right? Um, it's okay to be selfish sometimes. And when I say selfish, I mean in the way that you are thinking of yourself. You know, everybody, this whole cliche to put your own oxygen mask on first.
Yeah.
It's said for a reason. You can't
Yeah.
be the best version of yourself in the world if you're not taking care of yourself.
Yeah, no,
So
100%, 100%. And Niyatu, I love that you talked about respect because our name, our, insisting, because I've been live so many times, and I remember being okay with being called Sonal, Sonal. Now, anybody who's watching from India, Sonal for me is a man's name, and I don't like Sonal. It just completely changes the way it sounds. I remember telling someone on my podcast that actually it's Sonal because I got so sick and tired of Sonal, and I thought in my head, this is so uncomfortable, but damn it, this
mhm,
is my podcast. So
yeah,
I'm gonna say it. I said it. Guess what? That person didn't like it. He didn't like being corrected. So we had to re-record. And guess what? The vibe was gone.
yeah.
And since then I've hesitated, but I've done it live a few times, and people are always usually not always apologetic and like I didn't know that. So when it comes to names, I just want to give a quick shout out to Nyatu for what he said. And if you go to LinkedIn, there's a little loudspeaker, like a little volume icon next to your name. Make sure you add your pronunciation if you haven't done so. I've already done it. And it's not just for people who have exotic sounding names. You can have a little branding in there. You can say hello or whatever it is. It's definitely worth it. And I'm seeing such fantastic comments here
I
from
know
our
there's one I want to.
lovely audience. I'm finding like really hard to keep up, but I want to
Oh,
see
there's
another
one I
thing
want
that
to respond to.
you want to feel free to, by the way, because there's so many, I'm not always looking. Go the
Okay,
extra mile where it counts. Thomas, that is brilliant. I'm glad you said that. I'm glad
me
you said
too.
that because it's otherwise you're just going to burn yourself out and fake it till you make it. I have very strong views on this. Malaika, what do you think about it?
That's the one I wanted to respond to. So Kitos Risto for saying that. If you can, let me see which shoulder is it. I have a sign that says "Faith it until you make it." I don't believe in faking it, right? And this is why I have this sign: "Faith it until you make it." Means you might understand that something is difficult to do, but you are determined and intentional about moving forward. Fake it till you make it. Your subconscious knows when you're being fake. And so I have a whole practice that I do to teach people how to do affirmations. Uh, in opposition to go on Google and find some "I am great, I am wonderful," all that
Yeah.
"I am enough." I mean, you have to start somewhere sometimes, but
Yeah.
if you're saying something that your subconscious just does not believe, you have to fertilize your spirit first. You have to fertilize your thoughts in your mind to accept. Back to the flower analogy, right? You can't put seeds in arid ground. You have to fertilize it and nurture it. And so the nurturing of yourself and your mind and your mindset will help you to make those affirmations stick. You can't just say them. So yes, I completely agree with the
I
uh,
love the analogy because people say, no, yeah, I'm just saying it. I've just planted the seed. Okay. I'm like, that's a great point. You've planted the seed, but the ground is dry. It
yes,
has not been watered. Planting it is not enough.
it's not enough. So
It's not
planting a
enough.
seed is not enough. It will just,
So
you
I love a good debate. And I'll tell you what,
know.
fake it till you make it is something I love. And I'll tell you why. The it for me is the controversial thing. What are we talking about? Because for me, if it fake it till you make it means successful, the first it, right? If the it is confidence, I have faked confidence when I am shivering before an important board meeting or going live or anything. I've faked it, but I feel competence, if you fake that, you will be
Mm.
found out because you are an imposter.
So yeah,
So that's my view on fake
I
it till you
love
make
that.
it.
I love that. So here, semantics, right? The words actually matter. So you were talking about the it, and I was
Yes.
talking about the fake. And so for
Yes.
me, the fake is more like be. So
Yes.
when I say fake it, to me, I'm pretending, and the pretending feels wrong, so I'm unable to do that. But when
Yes.
I say I'm just being, be the version of you that you want to see in the world, that is like it's again, it is just words, but it's like whatever makes it okay for you. And I don't care if you
Yes.
do fake it to, if you fake it till you make it, and that's okay with you, and you're like, yes, I'm gonna do this thing, I'm gonna be it, then that's the case. And I don't believe we too often tell people what they should do, and I don't do that.
I don't like the word should. No,
I
I don't like
say
the word
what
should.
works for you is the thing to do. And
Yeah,
yes,
exactly. Exactly. And I love this comment. So, Risto, funny story because Malaika, you can say thank you in what, 40 languages,
yes,
but you're not from Finland.
no, 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 not for Finland. Yes, I can say thank you in 40 languages because I never want to meet anyone on the planet that I can't say thank you to in the most heart centered way. And I feel that gratitude is my favorite human emotion. And I feel that there's something about speaking to someone in the language they learned in the womb that
No,
feels good to
that's
them.
lovely. Listen,
Yeah.
so this is a fantastic tip for someone, and we're gonna get back on topic. But sometimes when you have your resume or you have a bio, and I'm talking to the audience here, there's always that little, I feel like a lot of bios these days are so dry, boring. Studied here, worked here, and like, oh, and it's like fun fact. I can say 40. I can say thank you in 40 languages. Guess what? That makes you interesting. So if you ever like in your bio or on a resume, I would add that because I think that makes you very interesting. So absolutely love it. Yes, don't fake it. We're not talking about competence when you're
That's
flying a plane.
hilarious.
No,
Yeah,
no,
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 no.
no, no, no,
That's a
no.
great point. I think that fake it till you make it is what we were talking about with regards to being realistic. So talk to us about that. Like um, people don't realize, but even CEOs have imposter syndrome, at least the ones who talk about it, right? Most of
Yeah.
them will, particularly, I don't want to stereotype, but a lot of men, right? But the thing is, there is a line between like, I'm actually bad at my job and I
Mhm.
got promoted because I have the right connections or nepotism or whatever, versus I think I'm not good enough and I need to keep learning. Where how do we balance that?
Yeah, that goes back to the honesty thing, right? This is something that's we're always having to reassess and reevaluate and be honest about your skill set. There's nothing wrong with needing to do more. None of us are perfect, right? None of us have all the answers. We're growing. We're always in a state of becoming more than we were yesterday. But be honest about that. There's things that you know, and there are things that you can learn. And there's things that you have absolutely no clue about, right? But you also possibly can learn. Also, there are things that you have no freaking interest in learning. It's like, please don't bring that anywhere near me. But we don't accept that. We go, oh, I can do the things. I'm gonna. No, no, you don't like to do it. You don't want to do it. So we often put ourselves in bad positions because we're trying to be and do all things for all people. If that's not your lane, and when I say lane, it's not your interest, then
Yes.
it's okay to not go for it. I say all the time, I
Yeah.
lean unapologetically into my joy and genius, and I encourage other people to do the same. What makes me happy? I want to do what I want with whom I want when I want. And that goes back to that self care and that self pouring into yourself. And that's okay. And that's fine. You're not always going to have the opportunity to do that on every job all the time, but at least having that as your guardrail makes the things that you do worth doing. And I think
Yes.
that's what we're all here to
Yes.
say.
No, that's a great point. I think every time I've had, I'll never admit it, but I know it's comparisonitis, but I will be like, talking to my coach. And her favorite thing to tell me is, Sonal, swim in your own lane. And you just said that. So
Yeah.
it's one of those things I carry it forward, and I share this with my clients all the time because we don't realize at what point the ego is speaking versus the
Mhm.
true, the true soul.
Right, right.
So yeah, your beta version versus fake. That's such a great point. And Malaika, you got to put that on your LinkedIn profile.
Okay.
Paula
I
is
will, I will,
absolutely,
that's my homework assignment. I will
that
put
is
it on my
absolutely
LinkedIn.
right. Thomas, I love this because It's a big deal. It's a big deal. Any promotion is a big deal, and particularly CEO when all eyes are on you. So that's a great point. We have a question here already. I took the steepest targets and I achieved them, and yet I felt as an imposter as I imagined. I could have had like a higher aim. Is that the same thing?
I would say it's somewhat, right? So I don't think there's a blanket explanation for imposter syndrome. And I don't think it, even though I think the wording kind of throws it off because syndrome makes it sound like something that you're steeped in, you'll never get out of, right?
Like a
It's more,
medical diagnosis?
right, right. It is more of a considerations to think about when you're moving forward. So for me, I have learned that when I'm afraid, that's probably the direction I should go in because I know that I'm a perfectionist. So the things that I'm typically afraid of are things where I have to show and prove. Even when I know that I've done it before, if it's somehow bigger, grander than I've done before, I start to tell myself how I'm not ready, right? And so I have learned to move through that. And so it's the same, but it's a little different. So I know that
Yeah,
wasn't the answer that you're looking for, but it's really more of a just everything is a case by case basis. Let's put it that way.
exactly,
Everything
exactly.
that you are looking to do, look at it through the lens of one, have I done this before? Okay, if you haven't done this before, how about have you done something similar?
Hmm.
How about where have you succeeded where you thought you weren't going to? So reminding yourself of how fantastic you actually are is really good and write it down. Like write down the times where
Write
you
down
have
the
been able.
accomplishments. And I want to talk to you about this because we were talking backstage, and at some point, there's a fine line between being proud of it and your accomplishments and being just pure arrogant, and we were just talking backstage about a certain president of a certain country. I will not name which one, where um, the whole world has seen a lot of confidence to the point of arrogance. And I'm like, is that imposter? I'm like, no, it's actually the opposite. But how do us mere mortals watch out that the confidence in our accomplishments, which is fighting imposter syndrome, doesn't come across as arrogant?
Yeah. Um, ask yourself for the receipts, right?
Ask
So
yourself for the receipts.
yeah.
Ooh.
So if it's like you're having a conversation with yourself, right? Or there used to be that little thing with the red the devil and the angel on your shoulders talking to you, right? So think about this. When you say that you can't do something or you're not able to complete some task, ask yourself for the proof. Prove it. Prove that I haven't done it before. Because guess what? When you count, what do you start with? One. One, two, three. You have to start somewhere. So when you count, you're starting from one. So you've started somewhere before. And if you've never done it, you can find, or you should be able to find, instances where you've been able to accomplish. And it doesn't have to be the same thing. It just means that you have the inside ability to overcome a challenge. And so ask yourself for the receipts. If I tell myself I can't do that, prove it. What is making me say that? Like it's a peeling of the onion, but you have to start asking yourself these kind of powerful questions and separate fact versus fiction. Like what is it that
And
you're telling
that's a good
yourself?
point. And if you don't have the objectivity to ask yourself this, then work with a coach, work with a friend who you can trust, who you
Yeah,
know will give you
absolutely.
objective feedback.
Absolutely.
So that's interesting. Noor, we talked about people pleasing as well to a certain extent. If you're joining us a little late, definitely watch the replay because I think you'll get the answer to that. So what if it's true? Like, what if I haven't done enough or my skills don't match the job and I apply? So I'm in your face imposter. Like, what's going on?
I love this. So here's the thing. I'm brutally honest. And I that takes some time to get to because we shy away from our so-called weaknesses, right? So we
Yeah.
all know that common HR question of your strengths
Yes.
and weaknesses, and many of us hate it, right? And we also know, depending on what side of the desk you're sitting on, the answer to what are your weaknesses usually has to do with playing up your strength. It usually
Mm.
has to, oh, I'm a people person. I care too much about people or something like that, right? Um, I don't believe in going out of your way to do things that don't make you happy and don't serve you. And so I know that this is difficult for people to understand sometimes because they say, well, you have to, there's grunt work. Yeah, there's grunt work in every job.
Yes.
That's not the point. The point is when I go to interview, well, I don't interview anymore, but when I did go to interview, um, I was very honest about my skill set and the things that I could do, but I also brought to the table how I've leveraged things into other things, right? And so
Can you
I
give an example of that?
absolutely, absolutely. So I was asked one time in a job interview, they were talking about some particular software and using of that software. And I've never done it, never touched it. Some people will be afraid and like him and haw around it. I need to know, I need them to know that that's not my strength. But here's what I can do. And so I told them I've never touched this particular software, but I have built systems by bringing people together that do have that skill set. And so that they're able to complete it because I can't do everything anyway. And so the other thing about interviews is I hate to tell you, but you're actually interviewing the company as well.
Yeah.
So one of the questions I asked them was, do you have people that do this software? Right? So another thing is being prepared. If you know something is on your is lack or to your you think it's lacking from your resume, right? You can ask where in the company does that expertise lie? Can you and how can you leverage it? So that shows two things. It shows a person that you have been thinking through what this job actually takes and that you also understand and know how to leverage resources. So resource allocation is very important no matter what level you're in. So when I asked the interviewer, when I told them, one, I've never done this, but hey, do you have people that do so and so? Guess what the answer was? Oh, well, yeah, we actually have a communications department and they cover that. So
But the main thing is you asked.
something that could have been my, oh, they're going to find out I don't know how to do
Assumption.
it.
Assumptions can kill you and make an ass out of you. That's
Yeah, exactly.
assumption. No, that's
Oh, and
such
one
a
other
good
really quick
example.
thing about how what if I really haven't done enough? Again, that goes back to you can train yourself up, and so let the interviewer know that hey, I've not done this thing, but I'm really interested in it. I'd love to because oftentimes that's what you get training dollars for.
And it's such a I love this line when people say it in interviews. I mean, I know you said you don't interview anymore, but you have clients, right? And they're interviewing you. So at the end of the day, the conversations are very similar. And I love it when I used to interview people and they'd be like, would you know this? So the recruiter or the interviewer knows this is a nice to have versus this is like a deal breaker, right? Without this, we will not even call you.
Great point.
But the nice to have is actually going to help them hit, for you to hit the ground running. And I used to love it when people would say, I don't know this, Sonal, but I'm an excellent and very fast learner. I
Mhm,
promise you that. That's
mhm.
it. They are not lying, no fakeness
Right,
whatsoever. But and it gives a lot of reassurance
right.
to the other person.
And lastly, their transferable skills. If you haven't done this thing, what have you done that can help accelerate that? So I used to years ago, I was an advisor for a nonprofit for veterans, and so we were building veterans transition centers, and a lot of work we did with people who were coming from the military and now had to have civilian jobs, and they were a little lost in how they can transfer what they did in the military to what was needed in the civilian workspace. And so we worked with them to really just the same thing we're talking about. It may say on this job rec these things, but this is what you did in the military that is the same as or sometimes better than what they're asking for.
Ah, yeah, that's lovely. I'm just going to give a shout out to my friend Varsha, who actually is a resume writer for people who are leaving the military and going into
Oh,
civilian jobs. So Varsha, this was a very interesting point. And I have another friend here who's a resume writer in, I think, good Lord, I think North Carolina, if I remember. Uh, and I'm sure she does this when she's interviewing her clients, when she's doing the resumes for them. No matter how small that accomplishment is, when you're saying ask for receipts, those are great reasons why you deserve to be interviewed when you document it. And another friend who says, you got to build the bridge, you got to hold their hand, show them how. And I like the thing that you said about resources. Be resourceful. Like, I'm resourceful, I'll get stuff done, just give it to me, I'll do it. If I don't know how, I'll figure it out. Hello, Google. We live in an age where not knowing something is not an excuse. Of course it's different when you don't like it, that's different.
yeah.
And then you need to be honest, and I think that's a great point. I saw a question on confidence. So how do you fake confidence? Okay, let's talk about confidence for a second. We did a little bit earlier. What is that right amount of confidence and how can you fake it?
So it's a very internal thing. It's like There are a lot of things that we innately know and we push aside, right? And so there's something inside you when you're being fake, you know it. It doesn't feel good. It does not feel good. So I teach my clients to search for congruency, to search for the things that align and feel good. And it's something about it. And you see, I'm even noticing it's so funny. You warned me about this big bubble, this big this
Ah,
switch,
yeah.
the
You
big
don't love
screen.
it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So what I was gonna say is even as I'm describing it, I'm sitting up straight in my chair because it's something about feeling good about yourself. That
Yes.
sort of confidence is the good confidence. When
Yes.
you are arrogant and full of yourself and just, and usually arrogance has more to do with taking others down than it does with building yourself up. So when you notice that the things that you're saying is telling how you're greater than other people, and the things that you're doing is trying to put yourself above other people, that's arrogance.
Yes.
Confidence is with, the confide is inside. So it's being strong with who you are inside. And when you do that, you feel good. And if it feels good, then I would say it's right.
That's such a great point. I anyone who's a Spanish speaker, I love little tidbits like that. Uh, I'm gonna write that down. So the very word confidence is like telling us something. In Spanish, con is with, right? Con, contigo. Fide is within, and confidence. So it's coming from within. But I also think arrogant people, it's coming from a place of fear. It's actually coming from lack of confidence. It's,
Mhm.
you know,
'Cause they're overplaying it. You're overdoing it so that people don't see,
exactly,
right?
exactly. Cover
Whereas
up.
when you're sitting in your realness, when you're sitting in who you are, that's
Yeah.
within yourself, telling
Yeah,
yourself
yeah,
that
yeah,
you can do it.
exactly. And my friend Lee, who actually doesn't live too far from you, actually, learning how your skills and results can translate to achieving specific outcomes. And the keyword here is specific. So you want to, showcase that when you're talking to people, and also in on your resume. So that's fantastic. So now I'm going to talk about let's talk about big goals, right? And in we have BHAG, that's an acronym: big hairy audacious goals. And for my Hindi speaking, Urdu speaking friends here, bhag, big hairy audacious goals. It's funny because bhag in Hindi means run. So it's like big hairy audacious goals, run, like run in the opposite direction, run for your life. This is scary stuff. So how do we stop being afraid of those bhags?
So the way you stop being afraid of anything is to stop trying to stop.
Stop trying to stop.
Stop trying to stop. So how do I stop being afraid? Fear is a natural human emotion. I don't believe in necessarily overcoming fears in the
Mm.
way that I think a lot of people talk of it. I think that we are walking through them. It's still there. And guess what? When you get on the other side, fear is really about the unknown. And so when you get on the other side of something, you go, oh, that wasn't that bad. So now I'm not afraid of it anymore, right? But it took you walking through. So uh, courage follows action, not the other way around. You don't get the courage, right? People think of it like that, but you're not courageous. You're courageous after you've actually moved. You move first, and that is what produces the courage. Like, okay, I can do this. And then secondly, big goals. I have a different take on goals, which I'm sure you won't be surprised. I have a different take on just about everything. But goals, I have an acronym that I use with my clients for goals, and that's gain opportunities to apply leverage.
Say again. Gained
Gain
opportunities.
opportunities to apply leverage. Because sometimes we think that a goal is this thing that we have to have and it'll do something for us. But actually, sometimes that the things that we're calling goals are actually just tasks. Because if you know how to do them, if you've done them before, it's not really a goal, it's a task.
Yeah.
So their goal should be things that give you an opportunity to move forward in some way. So it doesn't have to be the end all and be all, and what often ends up being anticlimactic because we think, oh, now I've got here, I'm here, now what? It's never a now what, because it's an opportunity to apply leverage. So every step is just gaining an opportunity to apply leverage and move forward.
Yeah. No, that's lovely. I love that.
And it stops it from being quite so scary too,
It's not
because
exactly. It's exactly the opposite of what we talked about, which is big, hairy, audacious goals. They're not hairy. They're not big. They're audacious. Look at the micro goals. Focus on that because you can control the outcome to a very large extent. And I'm a sucker for good acronyms, so I knew this conversation would be good, but I didn't know it was going to be that good. So I love it. And We have interesting questions here from Paulina, from It's. I promise I'm going to come to you guys. I just want to finish off with our conversation on this particular topic. So, um, what's the right amount of confidence? We said ask for the receipts. Oh, yeah. Oh, boy. I had 6 questions in here. I think we're done with the 6 questions. Like,
Mhm.
time flew. Time really, really flew. It's already 39 minutes. And I don't even know how it happened. So I'm going to go into the questions and see. So Paulina is saying, how do you answer questions like, how do you communicate effectively? Like, is it back to? I'm thinking it's back to what Lee said. Specific outcomes, maybe your stories and your examples. Malaika, you want to add something here?
Certainly, definitely stories. So, how do you communicate effectively?
Hmm.
Um, when someone asks you that question, you can tell them about a time where something could have been misconstrued and you fixed it, you figured it out, or you went to several people to figure out what was really going on to fix an issue. So think about breaking down, and I come from a family of teachers, right? So um, breaking down the sentence, how do you communicate effectively? So communicate is to work with other people and to get your point across and to listen to people. Effectively means that it gets the job done, because in all honesty, most places jobs don't care about what you do necessarily. They care about what results you can get, right? And so the effectively part is, what was the great result you got because you spoke to or communicated people, or handle some sorts of logistics to get something done. So the best way to answer how you communicate effectively is to tell the story of how you did it in the past.
And the story has a start, a finish, and ending. So there is a challenge and then there's an ending. So use the PAR approach that my friend here talks about a lot, Lee. Problem, action, result. So then you know you're not going to go wrong, because otherwise, I call that drunk driving. You're talking and then you're like, you don't know where this is going, and there's going to be an accident because somebody is intoxicated. Obviously, not literally. So fantastic. I don't know. There's very interesting questions coming on interviews and communication. So what do you think about this one? It's asked by Ruchi. How do you answer? What are the barriers of I don't know. Do you have any point on it? Because it sounds like a very hypothetical question to ask in an interview.
It is very hypothetical, but so these a lot of these questions about communication go to your personal experience, but
Yeah.
also go to being very circumspect, like you said, about a particular instance. So barriers to communication generally are misunderstanding, right? That's
Mhm.
literally the opposite of communication. Barriers to communication are misunderstanding,
And
or
assumptions.
assumptions being made, and also unwillingness. So you can't, if I call you and you don't pick up the phone, that's a barrier to communication. So you have to be willing to engage in communication. So being able to tell someone what things you know of, right, that can hinder communication is the simple answer to that question.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a great point. Thank you for that. Rajiv here has an interesting mouthful here. Let's go. Often the thoughts during the interview are, well, this is new to me. I know I can get it done and I have the transferable skills to get the job done. However, the feedback, like the vibe that you're getting from the interviewer, is clear that you don't have the experience. You're not the right person. So at what point do you stop that self sabotage, self impression at that point? Do you seek feedback from the interviewer right then as to how to better position yourself? Is that a very risky move to make? What do you think?
Oh, this is a great question. Okay, so you should also be setting the pace in the conversation. So in my career coaching, I teach my clients to take more control over the conversation, because we naturally feel out of control when we're interviewing. We feel like the interviewer has all the power. And so we're just there to answer questions. No, that's not where you're there. You're there to figure out whether or not this opportunity will serve you best, right? And so in when you're talking about, I know it can get it done, and that you're getting this like, I don't know, back
We
from the,
don't think so.
I don't think so, right? One of the things is powerful questions, powerful questions, powerful questions, powerful questions. Always ask questions. So ask them, what is the most important thing in this role? What has been, what sorts of what sorts of people
Hmm.
have been successful in this role?
Hmm.
So you're asking them to tell you
Yes.
what makes it right. So then
Yeah.
you can kind of dovetail off of what they're saying. And if by chance whatever they're saying you really don't have and is not something that's in your wheelhouse, this is where honesty comes in. Every job opportunity is not the one for you. And I know it's painful, especially when you've been out here searching and you're interview after interview and you think, I need this job, but you have to take the desperation out of it because you don't need that job. You may need a job, but you don't necessarily need that job. And you can pin yourself into a poor situation by just desperately wanting to fit in where you
I
naturally.
know. I know. I love that. And I read this somewhere, and I think it was last year. Um, Go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Very
And so
like bare
often,
minimum. Let's take her. We didn't find anyone else. And then, guess what? 3 months later, they're miserable. You are miserable and crying every Monday morning. Like Sunday night, the crying starts. It's not worth it. So you got such a great detailed answer, Rajiv. I hope this is helpful. I'm going to take the last question here because Malaika has to go. And the question is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you answer, hey, Nikita, what are your communication skills? Without coming across as overconfident, arrogant, versus also, self sabotaging your chances.
okay, great question. And I will always tell you to go high when you feel when you're confident. And then just back it up with those examples we were
Back it up.
talking about.
Back
So
it
if
up.
someone asks me to rate my communication skills, I'm gonna say a 9 to 10. Like because you only gave it a 10 and I might feel like I'm a 12. This is what I do all the time. I love doing this. I sit in this, I think it, I dream it, right? So I'm very confident in that because it is a skill set of mine. So I'm perfectly okay with saying 9 or 10 and saying, hey, well, do you have a 12? Like, because that's who I
Oh,
am.
I love it. Just be
Yeah,
confident and back it up with examples. You've got the receipts, Nikita. You've
yeah.
got the receipts. Just show them the receipts. It's absolutely fine. And obviously, we're not talking literal receipts. Um, and it's not, remember, it's not bragging if it's true.
It's
It's
not
not
bragging. It's
bragging if it's true. So hopefully that helps you. And I see a couple of questions which are related. You're very welcome, Rajiv. I see a couple of questions which are related to interviewing skills. Ruchi, I highly recommend that you check out my interview playlist on YouTube. So last thing from you, Malaika, before I let you go. Anyone who's listening are like, okay, I got a good idea. We went through so many things. A quick recap. We talked about imposter syndrome. What is the difference between being an imposter and thinking, yeah, but that's realistic? How do you come across as, how do you make sure you don't come across as arrogant? What if you think you've genuinely not done enough or you don't have the necessary skills? We talked about what is the right amount of confidence and how do you stop being afraid of big goals. So we covered a lot in like 47 minutes. So if you're joining us late, hi there, but make sure you watch the replay because this conversation is golden. So before I let you go, Malaika, what is that one maybe parting thought from you um, to that person, that one person who's watching? And, fear is a big part of that person's life on a daily basis.
yeah. I would say we are all becoming. You are not now who you were yesterday and certainly not who you'll be tomorrow. So be okay with the journey. And I know it's difficult when we have a destination, we have a goal in mind, and I need to be this. Trust me, I was 29 for a couple of decades. So I understand that you're just not okay sometimes with, the way life is showing up for you, right? I get it. But you are not yet who you're meant to be, right? And that's because you're constantly evolving. And just being okay with that and knowing that it helps to ground you so that all of the ways that you look at the world are in the lens of how can I be a better version of myself? Always. It's not perfection. It's just how can I be a better version of
And
myself?
it's not a one and done. It's never finished.
It's never finished.
It's never
Absolutely.
finished. Thank you so much. So if you're not following Malaika, I highly recommend that you follow her on LinkedIn and check out her website, malaikasimmons.com. Malaika, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
I hope this was fun, guys. Please make sure you put it in the comments. Give us lots of likes. This was such an interesting conversation with the very fabulous Malaika Simmons on everything to do with imposter syndrome. I learned a lot. So, two things before I let you go. Make sure you join us next week. We're going to have another fabulous guest. Her name is Diana Alt, and we're going to talk about personality tests. Whether you love them or hate them, they're there. and how can you make them your friend. So check that out. And if you haven't signed up already, what are you waiting for? I'm getting enrollments, so exciting. There's going to be a fabulous live masterclass with me on a weekend in October 23rd, 24th on all things salary negotiation to get the salary you deserve. So thank you so much for joining us. Take care of yourselves and shall see you next Friday. Have a good weekend.